Welcome to our weekly livestock report. I'm news anchor reporter for Brownfield, Meghan Grebner. With us this week again is Missouri University's Scott Brown. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Megan.
Let's start first. I would say probably the biggest thing we need to talk about is going to be that cattle on feed report. Any surprises with those numbers that just came out?
Yeah, I don't think we see a lot of surprises relative to the pre-report estimates. When we look at total cattle on feed, up about 1% here in March. Placements were up 10% relative to 2015. That may seem like a big number, but I'd remind us part of that increase is really because 2015 was much lower because of some weather events occurring there. We seem to be staying more current in terms of Fed marketings, up 5% relative to the 2015 levels. So I think all in all, not a lot of surprise out of that cattle on feed report. I do remind us that leap year comes into play here, so some of those percentage growths look pretty large. But when you adjust for leap year, we're on track to have more supplies of cattle coming from that cattle on feed report, but really nothing new relative to what we expected going into the report.
How much do those pre-report estimates come into play when we see those numbers finally come out on Friday?
Yeah, so I think it certainly has some effect on markets. You have a lot of folks who are out there trying to pre-guess where we're going to come out in terms of inventory and on-feed, et cetera. And when we come out a lot different than those pre-report estimates, we can certainly see some market moves as a result of that. But in many ways, I think that helps markets be more prepared for what's coming in terms of that data. Always, we're going to second guess those pre-report estimates, and frankly, the data that we get from USDA from time to time, and ultimately, it matters what we see when we see how much beef we produce. But there can be times when we get big market moves, but most of the time, we're going to get that when pre-report folks have really missed the mark. And again, this report certainly doesn't suggest to me that we're on track for anything different than what we really have seen for a while in terms of more cattle coming, probably deferred into late 2016.
Scott, last week we talked a little bit about exports and demand for our meats. Let's get into that maybe a little bit more this week. Are we seeing an increase in exports as well?
So I think we are starting to see a little bit of positive news there. One really needs to look at the weekly export volumes to start to get a handle on the kinds of increases that we've seen. And we've seen some, in percentage terms, some very nice increases in both beef and pork exports. I'm always hesitant to get too excited out of that weekly export data. I like to see the monthly data available from USDA before saying too much. That weekly data tends to move around a lot from time to time. But I think it's important to realize what's been happening to the dollar relative to some of the currencies that we talk about. Just to give folks a little bit of flavor here, just remember this week the Japanese yen relative to a year ago is still 11% higher. Yet when we kind of look at what's happened since the first week of the year, we're down 4.8%. So by and large, that makes our products cheaper to Japanese consumers. And you can start to see that across the board in terms of the Australian dollar. The dollar is 5.8% weaker since the first of the year. That was a growth of 25% when you look at this week versus where we were in 2014. A number of currencies. So South Korean won. We were up 17% that first week this week versus the first week of 2014. That's since the first of the year down 1.1%. So although we're not seeing a big collapse in the dollar, the fact that we're not growing as quickly as we did during 2015, I think, is providing us some opportunity to see some more product move out of the United States, which is nothing but good for us given the amount of supplies we're going to bring to the market this year.
And we talked about last week that stronger U.S. dollar and some of the challenges it creates. So this is maybe giving us an opportunity in that area as well?
Yep, so I just remind us we still have a stronger dollar relative to a couple of years ago. However, a little bit of good news as we've started 2016, and we'll all see where we go for the remainder of this year. But it is nice to see us maybe being a little more competitive as we've entered the early part of 2016.
Let's talk a little bit about pork production in the United States. Where are we? We're in comparison maybe to a year ago, and how does that play out and maybe set up for 2016?
Yeah, some very interesting stories, I believe, starting to play out when you look at U.S. pork production. I think if you look at a number of analysts that would have been out there predicting 2016 production, which, by the way, we're only 3 months into the year, and things can change a lot, would say we're going to be up about 2% this year. Yet when you look at where we are on slaughter weights, we're down enough on barrel and gilt slaughter weights so far that even though being up 2% in slaughter numbers, we're actually pretty flat on pork production. And so the supply side may not be growing quite as quickly as we anticipated with lower weights, and I'm not surprised to see some lower in barrel and gilt weights, coming to market, given returns aren't nearly as good as we saw a year ago. But if we continue that below year ago level of slaughter weights for the remainder of 2016, less meat supplies. I kind of put that all together and go, less meat supplies, maybe a little stronger demand than we might have thought, might make 2016 end up being a little better year than many of us might have expected. So I'm in the good news side of this for this week, at least, Megan.
We will always definitely take a little bit of good news. Scott, let's talk a little bit, just kind of maybe a recap of anything else that happened this week that maybe we should pay attention to or take notice of.
Yeah, so I think USDA's told us, hopefully we're going to have better access for beef into Peru than, we've had for a while. I think that's nothing but positive in terms of some additional beef exports for us. So some other good news we see on the trade front. I think we're going to continue to see back and forth on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and may take us a long time to move that to fruition. I will continue to say for livestock agriculture, it's hard for me not to see, especially for cattle and hogs, TPP not providing some good longer-term export potential for us. But when I say longer-term, I'm talking years at that point in time. But I think that's some of the more near-term. I will say, it seems like we're getting an early spring started, and when I think about it from a feed price side, it seems to me we've done a lot of field work. We've got a lot of catch-up in terms of anhydrous supplied. Might plant more corn than we even anticipated of late. So from a feed price side, I hope as the summer unfolds we don't get into a drought from a livestock perspective and we could have even cheaper feed. I know the crops folks may not like to hear that story, but from a feed perspective, it's probably good news if we can get another good crop in the bin.
You mentioned trade, TPP, but also even the president is headed to Cuba next week. How does that potentially impact even more demand for U.S. pork products because it's so close?
Yeah, so I will say nothing but positive. I don't think any of those things by themselves are going to make it an absolutely stellar year or can move markets all that much. But the combination of those things. When you look ahead at where does demand come from, I think our demand for beef and pork products, by and large, are going to occur outside the United States. Things like Cuba only add to the positive. So we need to continue to see that kind of trade opportunity unfold. I think we have a good comparative advantage in a number of these commodities. Getting trade barriers down as much as possible is nothing but good news for us.
Got one last question. Weather. Let's talk a little bit about the weather. Temperatures have been unseasonably warm. Does that maybe give us an early start on the 2016 grilling season, and how does that play into effect for our livestock and demand for our products as well?
Yeah, I think when you look at it is very. It's been nice. Spring started early in a number of parts of the country. I will say we are seeing that with higher box beef prices. If you look at where we are relative to early March, we're up about 16 cents a pound on the overall cutout value, and believe it or not, the parts of that cutout that are driving are those that we're grilling. So loins up 41 cents a pound, I think certainly is a large part of what we see happening. So perhaps we've gotten a little earlier seasonal move. We normally see this kind of seasonal price strength, but it's tend to start to unfold 3 to 4 weeks earlier than maybe we see it most years. So good news again on the cattle price side of things, because those higher box beef prices, I think, have given us an opportunity to see some higher cattle prices occur this week as well.
Scott, it's good to catch up with you this week. Thank you so much for all of the good news. Hopefully we have more weeks like this.
Absolutely. Let's build on these good weeks, Megan. And thanks a lot for having me.
We'll talk to you again next week.